warm welcome from Islamabad, Pakistan. My name is Khalid Latif, and I am the Program Director Middle East at the Center of Pakistan and International Relations, COPER. COPER is a non-profit, non-partisan strategic think tank that advances solutions to Pakistan's national policy objectives through high-quality research and analysis. It is a pleasure to welcome you all today to this online conversation on Pakistan through the lens of Middle Eastern geopolitics. The geopolitical and geoeconomic forces that bind these two regions together is an area of growing focus and interest for us here at COPER, and for very good reason. Pakistan's Middle East policy, with its own strengths and weaknesses, is born out of the region's power dynamics underpinned by sectarian and economic configurations. Although the Middle East often presents itself as a geopolitical battleground where external powers tend to settle their contentions, Pakistan's relations with its long-standing allies in the Middle East have become uneasy since its decision to remain neutral in the Yemen war. The Middle East for decades has been one of the primary sources of financial support for Pakistan. Pakistan maintains close military ties with Saudi Arabia, providing extensive support, arms, and training for the Saudi armed forces. Since the 1970s, Pakistani soldiers have been stationed in Saudi Arabia to protect the kingdom. However, in the last few years, geostrategic compulsions have necessitated Pakistan to adopt a balancing act in order to safeguard its core national interests. Centrifugal forces unleashed in the Middle East has pushed the main regional powers into at least two opposing blocs. On the one hand, we have countries that could be described as supporters of transnational political Islam, including Turkey under President Erdogan and Malaysia under the former Prime Minister Mohammed Mahdiyar, versus on the other side countries advocating for a more nationalistic outlook on international politics such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Such dynamics have in effect reshaped the choreography of relations between the Middle East and Pakistan. Joining me to unpack these developments and much, much more are five excellent and distinguished list of speakers who I shall introduce in order of appearance. Our first speaker from Pakistan is Lieutenant Naeem Lodhi, a former Defense Secretary of Pakistan. The title of his talk shall be U.S. Exit from Afghanistan and Implications for Pakistan. From the U.S., we have Dr. Marvin Weinbaum, Director of Afghanistan and Pakistan Studies at the Middle East Institute. The title of his talk shall be Pakistan Navigating the Shoals of Middle East Politics. Also from the US, we have Arif Rafiq, President of Wiser Consulting. The title of his talk will be Pakistan-Saudi Relations in the Era of Mohammed bin Salman. From the UK, we have Umer Karim, Visiting Fellow, Royal United Services Institute. The title of his speech will be Power Politics of the Middle East and Pakistan. Last but not least, from Pakistan, we also have Brigadier Samson Simon Saraf. The title of his speech is going to be The Greater Middle East. Our moderator for today's session is Raja Faisal, who is a senior journalist and executive editor of the Asian Telegraph. Over to you, Raja Faisal.
To you, and now I would go towards the next speaker, Mr. Umer Karim. He's another young face we have here. It doesn't mean that rest of the participants are old. They are like me, young by heart. And we have Umer Karim, visiting fellow, Royal United Services Institute. Title of his speech today would be politics of the Middle East and Pakistan. A very important one. Floor belongs to you, sir, now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Raja Saab. It's a pleasure to join such an esteemed panel with actually people who are really top-notch experts in their specific field. So it's a real honor to be in this panel. I'll just give you a sort of a Middle Eastern background to this discussion on Pakistan's engagement with the Middle East. And I would just start with saying that Middle Eastern politics has taken quite a shift in the second decade of the 21st century, coupled with the Arab Spring protests. We have seen a major transformation in the state ideology and structures in multiple states of the Middle East. So it's not only a Saudi-specific thing. We have seen Turkey becoming more and more strategically invested within the broader Middle East, specifically the Levant, but also in the Persian Gulf, specifically during the Qatar blockade by its neighbors. We have seen transformation, of course, in Saudi Arabia, where power has been centralized in the office of the king and the crown prince, and the traditional fiefdom culture within Saudi power structure, where different princes were actually holding on to different ministries and then using those ministries as their own personal power base, and patronizing people from that power base has actually ended. So the defense ministry under Prince Sultan and then his family, the interior ministry under Prince Naif, and then his family, the foreign ministry under Prince Saud al Faisal. That whole dynamic has completely gone. And now each and every ministry, each and every file just goes straight away to the royal court and is overseen by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Similarly, in Iran, we are seeing lots of changes. So the relatively open political sphere of the 2000s, where there were 3 or 4 different camps, the reformist camp, the moderate camp, and the traditionalist camp, is now being completely eroded. And in the recent developments, we have seen even the moderate camp being completely washed out. So there has been a tendency of a straight centralization of power in, of course, coupled with the transformations in state ideologies. Saudi Arabia, the traditional bastion of Islamic ideology, or you can say Islamic center of power, the leadership there is not really very keen with its traditional Islamic agency and is opening up the country. There are schemes of social liberalization in Turkey, which for more or less 1 century was just interested in the West and everything within the West, culturally, ideologically. They have moved towards the Muslim world, and they're very interested in the Middle East, but also the Far East. And of course, under President Erdogan, there has been an Islamic outlook of the Turkish foreign policy. In case of Iran, of course, we have seen the Iranian agenda of quoting all Muslim countries or Muslim populations or Muslim street in general. Since the Syrian war, it has completely transformed into just quoting the Shia street. They are very clearly focusing on geosectarian policy right now, because they think that this will give them most strategic advantages. So in this situation, I would say that within Pakistan, people have been more or less adopted policies that were consistent with the traditional politics of Middle East, but not really catered to these new developments within the Middle East. And in order to give you a relatively better explanation of where and when Pakistani policymakers did these mistakes, I would put forward 2 examples in this regard. The first example in this regard would be Pakistan's decision to at first, Pakistan was one of the 3 countries that proposed a summit on Islamophobia in Kuala Lumpur, hosted by Malaysia, Pakistan, Turkey, and the Malaysian leadership. The three leaderships met in New York, and they said that, okay, we will hold this forum on Islamophobia. We will launch a new TV channel, and we will talk about some issues that really matter to the Muslim world. But then, when the Prime Minister came back, of course, even when he was in New York, there were apparent signs. Then the Saudis were not really very happy. So now this is a very interesting case, because if the Pakistanis, particularly the policymakers, the Foreign Office, because now, I mean, I don't really want to blame Foreign Office, because there were reports circulated that the Foreign Office actually informed the Prime Minister against doing this initiative. But in any case, Pakistani policymakers thought that such a step, which was proposed by, in others, Turkey and Malaysia, would also be acceptable to powers in the Gulf. And it is also interesting that Saudi Arabia, which by any doubt remains a big power in the Gulf, was not invited initially to this forum. When the controversy developed, then of course the Malaysian Prime Minister called the Saudi leadership and formally invited. But I think by that time it was too late. And also there was a very clear. I mean, anybody who works on Middle East, as Arif Saab suggested, or Dr. Marvin suggested, anybody who works on Middle East was very clear how were the dynamics between the Saudis and Erdogan or the Turks. So this would have been problematic. So what we did was, we went for this initiative, and when the Saudis pushed us, I'm not sure why the Prime Minister traveled again to Saudi Arabia. If he had to cancel his trip, he could have canceled it within Pakistan and just could have shown that this is our national decision, which has been taken after deliberation on the national level. But he then traveled again to Saudi Arabia, and then when he came back, everything was cancelled off. So everyone clearly interpreted it as Pakistan has done it on the pressure of Saudi Arabia. So what did Pakistan gain out of it? Pakistan didn't gain anything out of it. Pakistan, of course, backed out of an initiative which it agreed with Turkey and Malaysia. We know Prime Minister Imran Khan had very good rapport with, traditionally a very historic rapport with Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. They were close friends, and he considered him as a mentor. So that report, of course, because Malaysia was the host, and then President Erdogan also and Turkish diplomats, they also gave some scathing comments, which is fine from their perspective, because Pakistan was to blame. And on the Saudi end, we didn't really get anything in return. We did get some, you can say, some consolation that, okay, we will hold a forum on Kashmir or something like this. But once the train has left, then why would somebody or some entity really really go through that route? So in this particular example, just by misreading the political intricacies of the Middle East, Pakistan leadership didn't really achieve anything from the whole initiative. And it, at one end, there was controversy within the relationship with Saudi Arabia, and on the other end, there was no positive impact on the relationship with Turkey and Malaysia. The second example in this regard, which I think is again an interesting one, has been the outburst of Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi against Saudi Arabia in particular, and the OIC in general, regarding their stance on Kashmir. We cannot really blame Qureshi Saab entirely, because in TV shows like the 8 p.m. shows, the hosts are literally getting onto the heels of the speakers to get maximum out of them. So Qureshi Saab, who is a very mired speaker generally, he just went out. I mean, I don't really disagree with the contents of what he was trying to say, but I think when he went on with this, it became a diplomatic problem. again, after what was done, what was happening, I mean, if you just go through the feed of the Saudi embassy in Islamabad, their Twitter feed, you can see are almost 60 people, 60 to 70 people, which even included the Islamabad IG, who went and met the Saudi ambassador. It was, I mean, to be honest, it was quite humiliating that the country's political and military elite and the bureaucratic elite, they're all going into the darbar of the Saudi ambassador and asking for sort of forgiveness for an unintended act of speech. So again, what did Pakistan got from all of this? What actually Pakistan got was that General Bajwa tried, of course, to somehow smoothen up this whole affair, and he went to Saudi Arabia and was not given an audience by the crown prince. So even the controversy, which was very much within the civilian affair, it trickled out onto the, you can say, onto the military side as well. Secondly, I would say that if there is another problem which has been impacting upon, as Arif Sab truly suggested, that it's a structural problem, but because of a change of leadership within Saudi Arabia, the new leadership, they are looking at countries like Pakistan in a much more logical rather than emotional manner. So Pakistan is roughly 2 million expatriates who work within Saudi Arabia and who send very precious remittances to Pakistan. So Pakistan really cannot go against, I mean, if Pakistan could have gone against Saudi Arabia, these two clearly were the examples where the Pakistani leadership could have taken the initiative, but it clearly couldn't. Secondly, I mean, it's not only a change in how Saudi Arabia views Pakistan, but also if Pakistani leadership, I mean, again, I'm not saying that this is a wrong stance or a wrong discourse, but since the last 5 or 6 years, and this was not before that, since the last 5 or 6 years, there has been a stance of, or a discourse of neutrality vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia and Iran constantly being projected out of Pakistani leadership, Pakistani politicians, and the general Pakistani intelligence. So if Pakistan can project a stance of neutrality, then I think other states have also, you can say, they can adopt a similar stance of neutrality. But the problem is our neutrality has not again gotten us much, because when the Pakistani Prime Minister embarked on a trip to Iran and Saudi Arabia in order to diffuse tensions and provide some sort of mediation, the Iranians told us, please do more on the border security issues. There have been attacks of Jaish al-Adl and Jindullah from your side, and you are harboring terrorists that attack Iranian security forces and Iranian installations within the Iranian border, the Sistan-Balochistan border. And when Pakistan went to Saudi Arabia, the Saudis, I mean, I don't think so. There was also a very positive response in this regard. So I mean, Pakistan could have avoided all of this just by not doing any of this. But I don't know who were the people who really suggested upon working on all these things. In actual, a much less active or a much less, you can say, much less active foreign policy could have avoided Pakistan all of these mistakes. But the Pakistani leadership wanted to prove something, that it had some regional relevance. Other thing I think which is important from a military point of view is that the Middle Eastern countries that traditionally had been Pakistan's security partners, there have been some changes in that domain as well, because they clearly see that Pakistan is economically dependent upon them, but they are not really dependent upon Pakistan on anything. I mean, traditionally, they had this glimmer of dependence due to our military's presence within Saudi Arabia in particular. And Pakistan's military leaderships were considerate of that fact to maintain this presence in a way that it can be used as a leverage point vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia and its rulership and its leaderships. But for the last 5 or 6 years, we have seen two new trends in this regard. One, that the Pakistani military attachments within Saudi Arabia, they are of no strategic value. So people are working within offices as maybe doing some as data, inputting some data or general office work. So there is no strategic value of this presence within Saudi Arabia. The other thing is that the Gulf side has been also mindful of Pakistan's growing military engagement with Iran. So General Bajwa was the first military chief, I think, in decades who visited Iran twice. So this has also been noted within Saudi Arabia. So if like we note that the Indian Army chief has been visiting UAE or has been visiting Saudi Arabia, then the other side also notes such things. I mean, it's purely fine because every country has its own interests, and maybe we think that our interests are better served by engaging with Iran, and maybe that's how we can temper the Indian presence within Iran. So similarly, other sides have their own interests. Thirdly, I think that um, out of a sudden, Pakistan started to up its engagement with Turkey, and there were some the real or important engagement which was happening within the strategic domain and the defense domain. It was actually overshadowed by the engagement or partnership which was happening within the cultural domain. And again, we saw a lot of cultural, and actually it has been happening for now a decade, I would say, but it's only when elements of Ottoman drama, TV dramas of the Ottoman age, specifically Tughral, when they were telecasted within Pakistan, then there were some like, and also not because they were just telecasted, but the Pakistani Prime Minister gave them a thumping personal endorsement. I mean, they can be telecasted, but if you think that your own friends, and this is not my words, the Pakistani Prime Minister was a very personal friend of the Saudi Crown Prince. If you think your friends are a little bit, they're not happy with such things, then maybe you can play them out and don't really give personal endorsements. Because now I think there have been plans of a collaboration with Egypt and maybe UAE in the drama side. So where are we actually going if we are just reactionary in our policy making and in our views? I think what happened into 2021 till now, it's all positive. I mean, the Emiratis, not the Emiratis, but the Saudis, they have toned down whatever they were doing, and they know that this is not a Trumpian era anymore, and things cannot be just done by a WhatsApp message to Jared Kushner. While also the Saudis think that there is no, I mean, this is another interesting thing, that from the very start, there was no personal strategic issue between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. It was always because of third countries, that, okay, you are doing this venture with the third country and this is not acceptable to us, or why are you going with this country? Also, as Arif Saab suggested, I think the current state of Pakistan economy and the current state of Pakistan is such that Pakistan needs to get as much benefits from its friends as much it can. So Pakistan can't really play this bloc politics against, and Pakistan doesn't really have, you can say, the cushion to play such bloc politics within different countries of the Middle East. It's good to engage with all sides, and it's good to respectfully differ with them where we cannot really deliver. So it's also good to not give commitments or to not start assurances which Pakistan cannot follow through entirely. And I think understanding and developing a better comprehension of the Middle Eastern politics and how it is transforming could really help Pakistan. But the problem is that only I think it was last year that a proper Middle Eastern center in one of Islamabad think tanks was actually initiated. So Pakistan has a dearth of scholarship on the Middle East, and that when there is this dearth of scholarship, then that vacuum is being filled up by conspiracy theories, especially propped up by YouTubers and likes on social media. So I think number one, a lot of more seriousness and better comprehension and understanding of Middle Eastern politics, and possibly ensuring that our bilateral relationships are served are the primary track of engagement rather than blocks and multilateral alignments. These are few steps that if Pakistan adopt, Pakistan can achieve better dividends within the greater Middle East. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Umer, Karim. And there would not be a question from me. One of the viewers, he sent a question to us, and I would obviously present it as it is. He said, Sir Umer, how do you see Pakistan's role to resolve issues between KSA and Iran? I mean, we already know that Pakistan was moving around from Tehran to Riyadh. I mean, what do you see that?
I think the main problem in this sort of discourse or in this sort of understanding is consideration that Pakistan is really neutral. Pakistan is not a neutral country between the two sides. And particularly Pakistan has, because Pakistan has a long-standing military relationship or defense relationship with Saudi Arabia. And on the other hand, Pakistan has its own border issues, security issues with Iran, and also some of the workings of sectarian organizations that have done recruitment within Pakistan for the Syrian war. Pakistan was really concerned about all of that. So for such a mediation or such a, you can say, facilitation, I mean, they are grown-ups, both Saudi Arabia and Iran. They don't, I would say they don't need mediation. They just, whenever their leaderships want to resolve anything in between them, they can do it. We can provide a table if they want. I mean, the Iraqis are facilitating and providing a meeting venue for both sides. But I think Iraq is in a different position than Pakistan, because the Iraqi state has been heavily Iran has heavily embedded within the Iraqi state, and there is a section of Iraqi politicians and Iraqi, can say, intelligentsia who are actively trying to get out of this Iranian sphere of influence. So they have an incentive to provide Saudis with some space and to engage with Saudis. For Pakistan, I mean, if both sides, not a third party, but if both sides, Iran and Saudi Arabia, they want to discuss something within Pakistan on a track 2 level, this should be fine. But I don't think that there would be any incentive for Pakistan to go and usher both sides. It would only have negative reactions or negative impulses for Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Umer, Karim.